Before we dive into today's story, I'd like to ask you to check out a friend's new channel where incredible stories come to life. You'll find the link in the description below. Go ahead and subscribe, and don't forget to like and comment if you enjoy what you hear. Now settle in because this one still leaves me stunned nearly every time I recall it. Sometimes, even months later, I have a hard time wrapping my head around everything that unfolded. I'm still technically married to my soon-to-be ex-wife, Lisa, thanks to a legal waiting period that forces separated couples to live through 12 long months before any divorce can be finalized. It all felt like a drag, as if our fate was being deliberately postponed. Lisa was supposed to find another place nearby during this cooling-off period so that custody of our 3 kids could be evenly shared. But how did we get here? How did our lives become entangled in a web of betrayal and unexpected decisions? In a twist I never saw coming, Lisa's twin sister, Sarah, concocted an idea that would change everything for us. Sarah and her husband, Kevin, had been desperate to start a family, and instead of exploring more conventional options like a standard surrogate or adoption, they decided that because Lisa and Sarah are identical twins, the two of them shared the same genetic blueprint. In their eyes, Lisa was the ideal candidate to serve as a surrogate and help them have a baby. Yet the worst part wasn't even that the plan existed. It was that I found out about it way too late. For weeks, plans had been laid behind my back, with no serious talk or discussion. I wasn't included in any of the planning meetings. It was all decided as if I were just an accessory to their grand scheme. I remember that evening like it was yesterday. We were sitting on our worn-out couch, and Lisa nonchalantly scrolled on her phone as if we were deliberating over what to have for dinner. With a casual tone, she said, "I've been thinking about doing something really important for Sarah." My heart skipped a beat as I looked at her in disbelief. "What kind of important thing?" I asked. Without missing a beat, she finally looked up and delivered the bombshell. "I'm going to be her surrogate." At first, I assumed she was joking. I let out a half-hearted chuckle, expecting a punchline, but her steady gaze told me she wasn't laughing at all. "Wait, what?" I managed, sitting up straighter. "You're going to carry their baby?" She simply nodded, smiling as though this decision was the most natural thing in the world. "Sarah and Kevin have been trying forever, and since we're twins, it's almost like you're carrying her very own child." My stomach dropped. "Lisa, are you serious? When exactly did this come up?" she replied with an indifferent shrug. "A few weeks ago. We've been talking about it." Her nonchalance in revealing something so earth-shattering left me reeling. I tried to argue. "But you didn't even discuss it with me first." And she sighed as if exasperated. "Grant, it's not about you. It's my body, my choice. I don't need your permission." I couldn't contain my shock. "We're married, Lisa. This decision affects both of us," I said incredulously. She simply rolled her eyes and repeated, "I'm telling you now." In that moment, it felt like I was being forced into an ultimatum. Either I accept this decision or I get out. I vividly recall the tension that followed. "Either you come on board or—" "What? You think we should rethink everything?" she hinted, her tone dripping with finality. It wasn't just the surrogacy that bothered me. It was the fact that this enormous decision had been made behind my back. Lisa, Sarah, and Kevin had been orchestrating this for weeks, maybe even months, leaving me out of every critical conversation. When I finally confronted her, all I could say was, "If you go through with this, then we're done." She looked at me with frustration, replying, "You're being totally unreasonable." I almost laughed, not out of amusement, but at the absurdity of the situation. "Lisa, you're risking our entire life together by making this monumental decision without me. How is that fair?" Her response was dismissive. "I'm doing something beautiful for my sister." That answer only deepened my disbelief. I stood up, exasperated, running a hand through my hair, and said, "Yeah, well, maybe not for me." The months that followed were a whirlwind of escalating emotions and irreversible decisions. When Lisa finally broke the news that she was pregnant, I simply nodded, muttering, "Okay," then walked out of the room. 2 days later, I filed for divorce. Documents I had prepared as soon as she laid out her plan. It seemed that no one was surprised by this outcome. Lisa acted as though she hadn't seen it coming. I couldn't fathom her expectation that I would just accept her pregnancy being linked to someone else's child as if nothing were wrong. When Sarah and Kevin called, they tried every tactic to guilt-trip me, Sarah's voice dripped with accusation as she said, "You're abandoning your wife," as though I were some cold, unfeeling monster. I retorted bitterly, "Don't you realize that it was your idea in the first place?" Kevin, always the peacemaker, attempted to soften the impact. "Grant, this is a beautiful thing Lisa is doing for us. Can't you see that?" I crossed my arms and said stiffly, "I see that you needed a baby, and Lisa made her choice without talking to me. That isn't a partnership. It's just a decision you all dictated." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "You promised you'd support her no matter what," she snapped, "and she promised respect for you too." That was the moment everything changed. I put the paperwork into motion, and the official separation commenced. Initially, Lisa acted as though she was unaffected, holding on to that self-righteous aura as if she were beyond reproach. "I don't need you," she declared one evening after I insisted we end the discussion. "I can handle this on my own." I responded with a curt, "Then do that." But as the months wore on, reality crashed in. Suddenly, she was no longer so sure of herself, and the tension in our home reached unbearable levels. After filing for divorce, Lisa began acting as if nothing had changed. She seemed to believe that I still owed her some form of husbandly support, especially now that she was expecting a baby that wasn't mine. Meanwhile, I had already emotionally checked out. Why should I invest any more energy in a pregnancy that was the very reason for our separation? Despite the fact that she hadn't moved out yet, finding a nearby place wasn't easy while pregnant. Every time she asked for a favor, a simple trip to the store for pickles and ice cream or help setting up a crib, I had nothing to offer. One night, as she wandered into the living room while I was watching TV, she asked, "Grant, can you run to the store for me?" I didn't even tear my eyes away from the screen. "For what?" I muttered. "Pickles, maybe some ice cream," she replied, her tone pleading. I let out a dry laugh and responded, "I'm not your husband anymore, Lisa. Ask Sarah or Kevin to help." Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing more. As weeks turned into months, Lisa began dropping hints about how overwhelmed and alone she felt. At first, I ignored her pleas. After all, what did she expect? That I would swoop in like a knight in shining armor, as if I were responsible for undoing all the chaos? This was her decision, and I hadn't signed up for it. But gradually, her silent hints escalated into direct complaints. "I don't know how I'm going to do this without you," she said one evening, rubbing her belly as if that visual could evoke sympathy. I barely lifted my eyes from my laptop. "Call Sarah. Call Kevin." With an exasperated sigh, she insisted, "It's not fair I have to go through this alone." I closed my laptop and calmly replied, "If you really want to talk fairness, then remember, it wasn't fair to decide this without me in the first place." Lisa's repeated requests to step in were met repeatedly with refusal. Sarah and Kevin, who initially tried to mediate, mostly were nowhere to be found unless it was the big moments, doctor visits and occasional errands. But for day-to-day instances, I was the only one left to bear the weight of her decisions. One night, curiosity got the best of me, and I asked, "Where's Kevin been lately? I thought he was all in for this." Shifting uncomfortably, she responded, "He's been taking care of Sarah. She's still recovering from her accident." I scoffed. Well, he sure knew this baby was coming too. Shouldn't he have planned better? Lisa's face tightened. "He's doing his best. He's under a lot of stress." I couldn't help but retort, "Yeah, and you're not?" She didn't answer, but that was enough. Soon Lisa was leaning on me even more, asking for small favors like carrying groceries or setting up baby items. Every single time I shut down her request with a terse, "Not my kid, not my problem." One night after hours of quiet tension, she came into the living room while I was watching TV and implored, "Grant, please, just this once. Could you help?" That was the final straw. I fiercely replied, "I'm not your husband anymore. You made your choice when you decided to do all of this without me." With tears welling in her eyes, she collapsed into a puddle of sobs right there on the couch. Despite her desperate pleas, my resolve was set. "I'm going to bed," I said flatly, turning away from her. The following weeks followed the same grim pattern. She would persist with guilt trips, and I would shut her down. It wasn't merely about establishing boundaries. It was about standing firm on principle. If I helped even a fraction of what she expected, she'd take it as a sign that I was softening, and that would only lead to more demands, more entanglement. And then the baby was born. I stayed completely detached. No hospital visits, no check-ins. I had made it clear I would not be involved, so her tearful calls from the hospital were met with the same unwavering tone. "Grant, please," she cried over the phone. "I don't want to do this alone. I'm so scared." I kept my voice calm but firm. "You decided for yourself. Kevin is the father. Call him, call Sarah. Don't drag me into your decisions." Her response was barely audible, and soon after, her phone went silent as she returned home with the newborn. That was when the real chaos truly began. It was as if she thought that merely having the baby in the house would compel me to care. Instead, baby bottles popped up in the kitchen, diapers littered the living room, and every night the baby's cries were accompanied by her desperate knocks on my door. "Grant, please, this once, just help," she pleaded in the dark hours of the morning. I would respond curtly, "Your baby, your problem." Even when I was exhausted and she begged repeatedly, I remained resolute. Eventually, her frustration boiled over into a barrage of slammed doors and harsh words directed at me. One day, as the tensions reached a peak, Lisa stormed into my lap of reality with a mix of anger and resignation. "You're still my husband," she argued, "and you could at least pretend to care." I couldn't hold back any longer. I stood up and said, "No, I'm not. Not in any way that matters anymore. You made your choice behind my back. Now you have to deal with the consequences." Her face twisted in anger and despair as she spat. "You're so selfish. You owe me just a little bit of support." And then she warned, "One day you're going to regret this." I could see in her eyes the heartbreak and the cumulative mess of guilt, yet I remained unmoved. Later that night, when I went to bed, I could still hear her soft sobs from the next room, a painful reminder that things were irreparably broken. And at that moment, I knew that no matter how heavy it was time to let go. The days passed, and soon Lisa was gone, with the baby in tow. For a brief, fleeting moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, this absence might finally bring some peace. The house was quiet. There was no crying, no constant reminders of guilt. But as dawn broke the next day, calls began pouring in. First from her mother, then her sister, all delivering pitches, pleas, and accusations. Sarah's voicemail was particularly cutting. "I can't believe how heartless you are, Grant. Lisa just gave birth, and you abandoned her during her most vulnerable time. Do you even have a soul?" I scoffed and deleted the message, knowing that nothing they said would ever change what had happened. This wasn't a surprise pregnancy we both agreed upon. It was Lisa's unilateral decision, one she made without discussing it with me. And when Kevin's voice came over the phone listing how tough things were, how family should come together in these moments, I nearly laughed at the absurdity. Family? Seriously? When you all plan this without me, that is not what family in a marriage should look like. And then came Lisa's mother, who usually had a gentle tone, but now her disappointment was as thick as lead. "I just don't understand you, Grant. Lisa is still your wife," she pleaded. I cut her off calmly. "No, she's not. The minute she chose to carry another man's baby, our relationship changed forever." The call ended in silence, but I knew the mess was far from over. Soon after, Sarah reappeared at my doorstep, exhausted, defiant, and carrying the weight of every shattered promise between us. With the baby strapped to her chest, she announced, "We need to talk." I didn't even look up from where I was. Instead, I calmly repeated, "I'm not ignoring you. I'm just stating the truth. This is your responsibility, not mine." She launched into a long tirade about being a struggling single mom, how everything was unfair, and how she'd never expected me to turn my back. After she finished, I met her gaze and told her plainly, "You signed up for this when you decided to be a surrogate. Don't act like my actions are to blame." That set her off, and soon the room echoed with her shouts, louder than the baby's cries on a stressful night. I simply said, "Not my baby, not my problem," and walked away, leaving her stunned in the silence. That night, Lisa did her best to soften the blow by trying another approach. She joined me in the kitchen while I was preparing dinner, and leaning against the counter, said in the quietest tone, "I miss the way things were, Grant." I barely paused my chopping. "That makes one of us," I remarked. She moved closer, her eyes glistening. "I still love you. I want us to be a family again." I raised an eyebrow. "A family? We lost that moment you blew up our marriage for your sister's sake. Her voice wavered, and after a long silence, she muttered, I'm sorry, but apologies, I knew, couldn't rebuild broken trust or erase choices made in haste. So with a heavy heart, I made it clear. You made your decision. You have to live with it. Lisa burst into tears again, confessing she didn't want the divorce, that she couldn't manage on her own. I shrugged and said, you don't need to face this alone. You have Sarah and Kevin. But she wasn't hearing me. Instead, she clung to the past, to a hope that maybe things could go back to how they were. I told her plainly, if you don't want a divorce, it's not because you love me. It's because you're afraid of losing the lifestyle you knew. And that was that. When the divorce was finally filed, I heard her crying in the next room that night. I felt neither sorrow nor satisfaction, only numbness. It was then that I realized all we had once shared was gone, burned to ashes by choices that couldn't be undone. The next day, Lisa's desperate calls started, a plea not only from her, but from everyone in her family. Her mom, her sister, even Kevin and Sarah were all determined to reach me. Sarah left a venomous voicemail accusing me in the harshest terms of being unfeeling. Her words, overflowing with disappointment and accusation, struck me, yet I simply deleted the message. Kevin, trying to mend things, insisted that family should rally together in tough times. But I retorted, I already tried. I've spent my fair share of time cleaning up your mess. Now it's time for each of you to handle your own lives. Even Lisa's mom, whose voice once comforted me, now nagged with reminders of how I'd abandoned the family in its time of need. Even as I stood stubbornly by my choices, there were rare moments when I almost felt sorry for Lisa. Every time we crossed paths, especially during custody exchanges, I could see the exhaustion etched on her face from the weight of her choices. One day, as she hesitantly asked, "Can we talk privately for a minute?" I reluctantly nodded. Away from the kids, amidst the cold tension, she whispered a timid, "I'm sorry." But it was too little, too late. I simply said, "I hope things work out for you." And with that, I closed the conversation, refusing to reopen old wounds. In the midst of all this turmoil, I have to say, if you're finding this story as compelling as I do, consider subscribing to our channel for more in-depth, real-life stories. Your support means the world, and every like or comment helps us reach more people who might connect with these raw, honest experiences. The divorce was messy, emotionally and financially draining, not to mention a complete upheaval of our once shared life. Lisa's lawyer painted me as the uncaring one, accusing me of abandoning her in her darkest hour, while my own lawyer systematically demonstrated that the baby wasn't mine to care for, and that Lisa had made the surrogacy choice on her own. I kept every document, every message as evidence, and while the legal battles wore on, the truth never wavered. I had been crystal clear about my boundaries from the very start. Even with the facts on my side, I never anticipated the incessant barrage of calls, texts, and letters from Lisa's entire family. They would reach out with emotional ultimatums and demands, pressuring me over and over. I tried to be firm and reasonable, but every attempt at a peaceful resolution was met with more manipulation. I eventually stopped responding altogether. It was clear that every word from me was twisted into making me look like the bad guy. There were moments, though, when I caught a glimpse of the woman Lisa had once been, a woman who cared deeply for our children, even if her decisions had set off a cascade of betrayals. In one quiet custody handover, she asked, voice trembling, "Can we talk?" I listened as she confessed in halting whispers that she was sorry for everything, that perhaps she had hurt me beyond repair. I simply said, "I hope things work out for you," and moved on. I wasn't ready to untangle the mess or rehash every misstep, because the cost of reopening old wounds was too high. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, a new and painful reality emerged. Full custody was eventually granted to me, while Lisa was allowed only scheduled visitation. It wasn't a victory. I knew no one truly wins when families are torn apart. But it was a small relief amid the chaos. Lies, manipulations, and guilt trips gave way to the hard truth. I needed to be the one providing stability for our kids. My ex-wife's lawyer tried tirelessly to paint Lisa as the victim, a selfless mother trying to do what she thought was right. But the judge saw through it all, recognizing the instability and the betrayals that had led us here. I remember sitting in that courtroom, listening as Lisa's attorney detailed how hard her life had been recently, how much she had sacrificed, and somehow implying that I was the one responsible for her pain. Then my lawyer rose and laid out every broken promise, every instance of deception. The evidence was overwhelming. When the judge finally issued the ruling, it felt as if a monumental weight had been lifted off my shoulders, even though a part of me still ached for what once was. After the court's decision, Lisa attempted to reconnect one last time in the hallway. "I still want to be part of the kids' lives," she said, voice shaky. I replied calmly, "That's entirely up to you. I won't let them be dragged back into chaos. If you're there for them, that's fine, but don't expect me to recreate our old life." With that, she turned and, in a dramatic exit that punctuated our final severance, she walked away. In the months that followed, I settled into a new kind of routine, a single parent determined to provide stability while the ghosts of our past occasionally resurfaced. The kids, confused by the changes, would ask questions like, "Is the baby going to live with us someday?" I had to explain gently that while their mom helped bring the baby into the world, the child now belonged with Aunt Sarah and Uncle Kevin. I struggled to find the right words to assure them that they were still the most important part of my life, even though our family had splintered irrevocably around us. Financial challenges came next. With spousal support claims and a labyrinth of paperwork, the divorce wasn't just an emotional ordeal, it was a battle over every cent. Lisa argued that, because of the baby, she couldn't work. I argued back that she had chosen this path, and that responsibility wasn't mine. In one of those long days at my lawyer's office, flush with documents and tense silence, I could only shake my head as I tried to understand why accountability was so hard to accept. And then there were the relentless calls. On a typical afternoon at work, my phone buzzed again with an incoming call from Lisa. I hesitated, knowing she needed help with daycare expenses or another crisis that had emerged. "What is it now, Lisa?" I asked, mentally bracing for another round of demands. Tearfully, she pleaded for some financial lifeline, expecting me to fix everything like I had before. But I maintained my resolve. "Lisa, the baby isn't my responsibility. You have Sarah and Kevin. This is on you." Her voice, thick with frustration, answered with, "You just don't understand what I'm going through." I could only exhale slowly and say, "Then try handling your own problems. I'm done trying to save you from the consequences of your choices." Those calls eventually fell silent, and for a short while, I even experienced a sense of relief in the quiet. But the relative calm was short-lived. Soon, a torrent of letters and emails from Lisa's family began, a coordinated attack of guilt trips and pleas that spread across every day. Lisa's own mother, in an especially long letter about decency and family unity, wrote about how I should support Lisa because family comes first. I read it, sighed, and tossed it aside. After all, we weren't talking about maintaining some ideal. We were talking about living with the consequences of Lisa's decisions. One evening, Kevin showed up unexpectedly at my doorstep, looking unusually awkward. "Hey, can we talk?" he asked in a hesitant tone. I leaned against the doorframe and replied, "About what?" After a moment of awkward silence, he confessed that things had been overwhelming with Sarah's accident. The baby, everything. I listened silently as he asked again for help. "For Lisa's sake, please, step up." I cut him off sharply. "This is about your own family. You, Sarah, and Lisa made the decision behind my back. I'm not responsible for cleaning up the aftermath." His jaw tightened, and without a further word, he turned and left, muttering that I'd regret my choices someday. Maybe I would regret it. Maybe I wouldn't. But one thing was clear. It was no longer my problem. Even as life went on, Lisa continued to use our children as leverage. One night she called and asked if she could come over to the kids. And though I allowed it for their sake, when she arrived, the agenda was obvious. She spent the evening recounting how sleepless nights and endless stress had overwhelmed her, and then casually suggested she move back in temporarily until she could figure things out. I flatly refused. "You made your choice, Lisa. I'm not about to let you undo everything we've done." Her eyes filled with pleading frustration as she argued that the kids needed their mother. "They have their mother," I retorted firmly, "but that doesn't mean I have to let you walk back into our lives as if nothing happened." Her disappointment was palpable as she left in a storm of angry resignation. In the aftermath, I focused on the kids, trying to provide them with a stable, loving environment despite the havoc unleashed by the adults around them. There were difficult moments explaining surrogacy to them, telling my youngest that no, the baby was not coming to live with us, and that the child belonged with Aunt Sarah and Uncle Kevin. I chose my words carefully, emphasizing that grown-ups sometimes make choices that are hard to understand, even when they are hurtful. I reassured them that their value and place in my life would never change, even if everything else did. Then came the inevitable legal battles. The divorce proceedings, already a mess emotionally, turned into a financial and legal quagmire. Lisa's lawyer argued that she was entitled to support because she couldn't work due to the baby, while my side, armed with texts, emails, and voicemails, insisted that I had never agreed to anything of the sort. The courtroom became a battleground where every piece of evidence showed that Lisa had made her decision independently, without ever discussing it with me. In a moment that still haunts me, I sat in that courtroom and watched as my lawyer laid out every broken promise, every instance of deception, until the judge ultimately ruled in my favor, granting full custody to me with only scheduled visitation for Lisa. After the ruling, I encountered one final attempt by Lisa. As she stood in the hallway, her eyes heavy with sorrow, she said, "I still want to be in their lives. I don't want things to be like this." I responded in a calm, measured tone. "I can't let them be caught in the chaos. If you show up reliably for them, that's fine, but I won't sacrifice their stability." With that, she left without another word. In the weeks that followed, the kids and I began to rebuild our lives. Although parenting on my own wasn't without its challenges, there was an undeniable sense of peace in finally having a home free from constant strife. I concentrated on work and my children, and gradually that enduring heaviness started to lift, replaced by a cautious optimism for a future where I could truly be in control of my own life. It wasn't all easy, of course. There were lingering texts from Lisa's family accusing me of cruelty, demeaning messages blaming me for my choices, even suggesting unthinkable things. I remember one particularly shocking message from her mom, decrying my actions and calling me heartless. At first I almost responded, but eventually I just let them fade into the background. Their words held no power over the truth I carried, that I had consistently maintained my boundaries even when it felt like I was fighting a losing battle. Over time, the calls diminished, and the relentless drama, once a constant assault on my sanity, began to recede. I realized that by refusing to step into a role I never agreed to play, I was finally reclaiming the life that was rightfully mine, the life of taking care of my children, nurturing my own happiness, and moving forward without the gravitational pull of Lisa's choices. Even now, as I reflect on everything that happened, the memories are a mix of anger, regret, and a strange relief. There were moments along the way when I almost felt guilty for my coldness. I saw the toll it took on Lisa, and sometimes I wondered if things could have been different if we had communicated better. But ultimately, I knew the truth. The decision to become a surrogate for her twin was hers alone, and I never signed up for the ensuing chaos. Before I wrap up this story, I want to thank you for sticking with me through this intricate and tumultuous journey. If this story resonated with you or made you think about the complexities of love, responsibility, and personal boundaries, please subscribe to our channel, drop a like, and leave a comment below. Your support means a lot, and it helps us continue sharing these deep, real-life narratives. Today's story is one of betrayal, heartbreak, and the bitter taste of consequences. It's a reminder that sometimes in the pursuit of what one believes is a noble act, lives can be shattered, and that the cost of choices made without mutual respect can be devastating and irrevocable. For me, it was a turning point, a moment when I decided I would no longer let myself be dragged down by the decisions of those who refused to share the responsibility. Now I continue each day with the firm belief that I did what needed to be done, for my sanity, for my children, and for my own future. It wasn't an easy path, and I'm still haunted by it sometimes. But at the end of the day, I know that maintaining my boundaries was crucial to regaining control over my life. I learned that sometimes love isn't enough to bridge the gap created by betrayal, and that in the end, the decisions we make define us far more than what we wish they could be. Thank you for listening to this sprawling, painful, yet honest story of divorce, surrogacy, and the messy aftermath of shattered trust. I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know if you've ever faced a similar crossroads or how you managed to overcome personal betrayal. And once again, if you enjoyed this narrative and want more stories that reveal life's raw truths, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. It truly helps us bring more real stories to light. This is our story, a story of choices, of consequences, and of starting over. And while the chapters of this journey are now behind us, the lessons linger. I'm left with the understanding that sometimes the only way to salvage what's left of one's life is to let go and accept that not all battles can be won. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and I wish you all strength in facing whatever battles you have in your own lives.